It's very clear that the United States is going through trying times. There is a lot of political divide in this country, and that political divide has turned into violence. We saw it most recently with the murder of Charlie Kirk. With that said, there has been instances of other political violence recently. Now, during a time like this, I would think, and I'm sure you would think as well, that you'd want leadership in the executive branch. That means the president of the United States, as well as the vice president, to have a tone of unity, to try to bring the country together. Because after all, we are all Americans. And after all Americans should work together to make the country better, even though our ideas might be different. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case. In the wake of Charlie Kirk's murder, I want to highlight 3 quotes, 2 of those from the president, 1 of those from the vice president, that unfortunately does the exact opposite. It does not unite, it divides. And as the president, he has one job, right? The president of the United States, his job is not to legislate. That is the job of legislators. The job of the president is to be a figurehead of the United States and to unite and be the leader of all Americans. So I'm going to go over these 3 quotes, and then I will put them on screen. I'll put the videos so you can make the decision yourself. Now, the first quote I want to highlight is this one.
What do we do about our country with that? Because we have radicals on the right as well. We have radicals on the left. People are watching all of these videos and cheering. Some people are cheering that Charlie was killed. How do we fix this country? How do we come back together?
I'll tell you something that's going to get me in trouble, but I couldn't care less. The radicals on the right oftentimes are radical because they don't want to see crime. They don't want to see crime.
Worried about the border.
They're saying, we don't want these people coming in. We don't want you burning our shopping centers. We don't want you shooting our people in the middle of the street. The radicals on the left are the problem. And they're vicious, and they're horrible, and they're politically savvy. Although they want men and women sports, they want transgender for everyone, they want open borders. The worst thing that happened to this country, because I've already solved inflation, costs are down. Look at energy costs. You're going to have...
Now, as you heard there, Trump says, I could care less. Now, to me, it sounds like he is saying, I could care less about uniting the country in a time of increased political violence. Now, there has been some debate as to whether he's saying that or he's saying, I could care less about it getting me in trouble. The way that it is worded and in the order, it sounds to me more like he is saying, I could care less about uniting the country. He then goes to say that the extremists on the right only want to see reduced crime, yet the extremists on the left are the problem. Now, before I give you my thoughts on this quote specifically, I also want to highlight something that J.D. Vance said recently. J.D. Vance was a guest host on the Charlie Kirk show, and he went on there and unfortunately straight up lied to the American people. He went on that show that millions of people watch, and he lied. He said that while the right wing definitely has its crazies, it is the lunatics, or the majority of the lunatics in today's day and age, lie on the far left. And then he said that is statistically the case. I will show you the quote right now.
And while our side of the aisle certainly has its crazies, it is a statistical fact that most of the lunatics in American politics today are proud members of the far left.
Now, without even starting to talk about how divisive this type of rhetoric or this type of commentary is, I will talk about that. I want to highlight the fact that this is a blatant lie. And statistically, because he said statistically, it is completely the opposite. There are many, many studies. In fact, I will list some below. There are many studies that show that the majority of politically motivated violence in this country comes from the right. And whether you're MAGA or you're on the far right, MAGA, left, far left, I'm just going to say I'm pretty center. I lean left, but I'm pretty center. And I try my best to see both sides and everything. I try to be reasonable. And I try to just see things as fairly as I can. Now, this video is not to inflame the issue. This video is to educate. And the fact of the matter is, when you look at these studies, that's statistically incorrect. Most political violence comes from the right side. And that goes back to what Donald Trump said. That's why I wanted to highlight both of these quotes before talking about both. Trump also said that he believes that the extremists on the right, they just want to see less crime. It's the extremists on the left that are the problem. The politically motivated violence comes from both sides, but it is heavily skewed on the right. More political violence comes from the right. Now, with that said, is there crazies on the left and the right? Yes. Because are there violent people on both sides? Yes, because that's unfortunately human nature. Humans are violent by design. Luckily, humans also have a brain, and it is our duty to reject that violence and to use our vocabulary and our intelligence, because that is our greatest weapon. It is our brain. We have to use our intelligence and our vocabulary to solve our differences, because if you are calling for more violence against fellow Americans simply because they disagree with your viewpoint, regardless of which side of the aisle you're on, that is not the right message. And unfortunately, it seems like it was the message chosen to be pursued by both the president and the vice president. Okay, I'm going to highlight one more quote, and this comes from Donald Trump, and this has to do with Melissa Hortman. Remember, Melissa Hortman was a Democratic lawmaker that was murdered. That was murdered just like Charlie Kirk was murdered. And a reporter asked if Trump would have lowered the flags to half mast for her like he did for Charlie Kirk. And at a time where the president could have chosen to unite, at a time where the president could have said something like, all political violence is wrong. Everyone is equal under the eyes of God, because that is the case. Everyone is equal under the eyes of God if you are religious. If you're not religious, then you probably think everyone is equal anyway. Instead of taking the time to put something that unites, he chose to say, and I'll show you the quote, but he basically says, who? Melissa Hortman, who? I'm not familiar with Melissa Hortman.
Do you think it would have been fitting to lower the flags to half staff when Melissa Hortman, the Minnesota House Speaker, was gunned down by an assassin as well?
I'm not familiar. The
Minnesota House Speaker, a Democrat, was assassinated this summer.
Well, if the governor had asked me to do that, I would have done that. But the governor of Minnesota didn't ask me. I didn't. I wouldn't have thought of that, but I would have if somebody had asked me.
So that we can then say one of two things. Either A, Trump does not keep tabs of current events. This happened like 2 months ago. I remember Melissa Hortman died. So instead of using that as an opportunity to reject all forms of political violence, he made it sound like he didn't know who she was. Either A, he didn't. Hard to believe, but it's a possibility. Or B, he was trying to be an asshole and further use it to politicize his message that the left is wrong and the right is just. I'm not going to drag this video out too long. All forms of political violence are wrong. All forms of violence from an American to another American are wrong. And really, violence should be reserved only when protecting your own life or the life of somebody innocent whose life or body is in grave danger of great injury or bodily harm. That is the only time that violence should be justified. It should never be the initial reaction to anything, even if you disagree with somebody. Because that puts our country on the wrong path. And I know it's easier to spread hate because that and disinformation, misinformation, all that spreads a lot easier, unfortunately, on the internet. I hope we see better in the future from our leaders, regardless of whether they're right or left. I'll be honest, I would vote for an honorable Republican, no problem. I tend to lean left, but I just want to see honorable, good leaders. And I can't think of another president who would use these times to divide. The good and the bad. The good or the bad presidents from our past. I can't think of another one who would politicize something like this. It's unfortunate. I would love to hear your thoughts. Even if you disagree with me, I want debate. I want debate. I think people need to debate. Civil discourse is extremely important. What happened to Charlie Kirk, there is no celebrating. at least not here. I think it was a horrible act. I think it was vile. I think it was disgusting. Even though I don't agree with Charlie Kirk, I disagreed with pretty much everything that came out of his mouth, to be honest. I would never want to see this done to anybody, because at the end of the day, he was an American. Whether you're left or right, whether you're extremist or not even, you are an American, and we need to treat each other better. We need to be there for each other. That's why these other countries they seem to be doing laps around the United States right now. It's because they are more cohesive and they treat everyone as equal, and there's more of a communal respect. Here in America, it feels like we're living in a fuck you, I got mine type mentality. And I think we're veering off course very quickly. As I'm sure you're well aware, this is my Yap About Anything channel, where I basically talk about whatever I think is interesting or that needs to be talked about. This is where I give you my unqualified opinion. If you want my qualified opinion, that's over on the main channel, where we talk very narrowly about finance, investing, Federal Reserve economics, Federal Reserve policy, interest rates. My formal education is in finance, and my last decade plus of experience is in finance and economics, so that is what we talk about on the main channel. That is my qualified opinion. This is my unqualified opinion. If this was informative or an interesting take, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. It's difficult to grow here on YouTube. So every subscription matters, and it means the world to me. With that said, regardless of where you lie in the political aisle, let's try to unite, not divide, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day in these very somber, unfortunate times. Take care.